Welcome to New Fragrance Review. Today I'm going to tell you my top 5 fragrance note that smells super cheap. So not so long ago I did a video of notes in cheap fragrance that will make me think that fragrance will smell amazing, but there's notes in cheap fragrance that makes me believe it's going to smell cheap and not amazing at all, and even more expensive fragrance. If I know there's these note in fragrance, I'm probably not gonna like it and think it smells cheap and maybe even bad. I would say there's a gap between like the 523 and 2-1. There's a big gap in between, but still I think all those notes will make a fragrance smell cheap. Number 5 is amber. And why amber? I would say amber is pretty much a cheap note already. And what's around it might change it, might make me think it smells more expensive. But amber usually it smells synthetic. It doesn't smell super nice. It is really used again and again in cheaper fragrance, even in more expensive fragrance, but in cheaper fragrance nowadays. So I think amber usually makes the fragrance smell a bit cheaper. And still in number 5, I would put vanilla into it. And why I'm putting those two together is that also vanilla is put in a lot of fragrance. Usually it has a little bit of cheap side to it. I think there's 100 different molecules that give the taste of vanilla, and a lot of them are also giving the smell of vanilla. Some of these molecules are cheap and they can be recreated, and they also smell cheap. And I'm putting both amber and vanilla because sometimes what makes the amber cheap is the fact that they use it, sometimes it's just vanilla itself. And I think amber and vanilla blend of those two usually is a note that would make a fragrance smell cheaper than what it really is. Though I would say that sometimes notes that are used that give the amber like ingredients, that are used to make the amber note or vanilla note might do the opposite. So that's why it's just number 5. Number 4 is peony. And peony is a note that is extremely rare in men's perfume. It's more known women's perfume, but I don't know why. There's something with it that I feel smells cheap. It feels like it's not a nice oil that is used, like nice essential oil, but some kind of super cheap aroma chemical that they just wanted to put it in so it gets cheaper. It's less expensive to make the fragrance. I don't think peony smells good at all. I mean, I haven't smelled like essential oil peony, so maybe like something natural will be different. Well, it's a flower, so it's probably more harder to make essential oil. But I think it smells cheap. Usually when I find this in women's fragrance smells cheap. Number 3 is plum. And plum, I would say, has a similar effect than peony. Those notes are extremely different, one of another. But I would say plum is really give synthetic, cheap kind of smell. And the thing is why it's higher in the list than peony is that peony is a flower and there's absolutely a natural ingredient that exists that could be in a fragrance that smells peony and then would not smell cheap. That smells good. But plum as a fruit is one of those notes that you cannot really create naturally. It needs to be created with aroma chemicals. Therefore, it's a note that will always smells cheap. All the fragrance that I smell with a note of plum always smell cheap. Even there's like from this, there's Dark Rum, Malin and Gertz. It was the one that was less like intense, how cheap it was making the fragrance smell. But still, I feel there's a gap between the other fragrance and this one because it just smells cheaper than the other one. Also, there's stuff like Bus Bottle that I think are extremely overpriced for how it smells. It just smells extremely cheap. Doesn't smell like something that would or should be expensive. It smell like those random $20 fragrance that you would get and kind of regret buying. I know a lot of people might enjoy the fragrance, but I think it smells cheap. There's also the Black Ferrari. Like, the way it smells cheap for real, this one. It's cheap, so it's all right. I don't know. I think just the note smells cheap by itself. I don't think there's any way to save it. Now, number 2 is orange. And I know a lot of fragrance that can be expensive will have orange, and so some fragrance might deal well with the note of orange. But still, when the fragrance is too centered on the note of orange, it smells like a cleaning product. And I don't think any cleaning product, like household cleaning product, in any way can smell expensive. It's a cheap, like the fragrance and household cleaning product are a cheap fragrance by itself because they don't want to sell it for crazy price just because it smells like nicer than others. I think when the note of orange is in fine fragrance, it makes it smell like some cheap product. I think it's that link that makes me feel it's really, really cheap. Finally, number one is soap. And the note of soap is a note that I really hate in fragrance, but I also feel it makes the fragrance smells cheap. It's not an expensive ingredient to put that makes that little soapy note, and it just makes it smell cheap. Smells like all those $20, maybe like those $20 fragrance you could buy 10, 20 years ago, those super cheap fragrance that smelled like nothing, like that 007 fragrance in a black bottle, for example. Just smell like any random stuff. I think if you have a fragrance that smells like soap, you're better off like washing yourself with a good soap than using this fragrance. Also, when you think about it, a bar of soap is cheap. So if you smell like a bar of soap, it makes your fragrance smell cheap, according to me. So that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If it's the case, well, like and share. And if you disagree with any of those notes, write in the comment what you think about it and which fragrance would be a good example of that specific note smelling expensive. So thanks for watching and see you soon.